Hello, everybody. Welcome to God Thing TV. Today, Pastor Bob is talking all about Jesus. Shocker. But he's really bringing Jesus into a new perspective for a lot of us, or just kind of reminding us about how real God, Jesus, is. And you should stay tuned.
Hey there. It's good to have you back. Today I want to talk about being touched by God. And that's a pretty interesting and serious thing. And it relates back to what we talked about a little bit last week on relationship. It's actually kind of almost a continuation of relationship because we have a real God and he really does touch us in our lives. And I want to share some of that with you today. I want to go into the premise today out of Genesis 1 that we are made in God's likeness and image. And that's a reality. We have to understand, and I think a lot of times people don't get the fact that you are actually made in His likeness and image. And guess what? God has feelings too. God gets touched by us also. And so let's look at it. Here's this eternal God. He pops out of heaven, right? Pops out of eternity. And he's taken on mortal flesh. He took on a physical body in Jesus Christ. So, here's the human race first actually being touched physically by God himself. That's where I got the title for this guy for you, by the way, is that I started thinking about it. Actually, I was talking about it with my wife the other day. I'm like, God, he's like a real God. Like he cares about us so much. And he wants to be in our lives, but not just this ethereal thing up in heaven, an actual encounter, experience, a true manifestation, not a manifestation like, oh, angels appeared. I mean, we can have that too, that's great. But he actually wants to be in our life to touch us and touch you, which is great. And so going along this lines, this is really the relationship, and I want you to hear it, that he desired to have with us as human beings. And I'm going to tell you this, he desires it today also. And I think some of us really forget that. We forget that God actually desires this of us. It's real. It's intimate desire. It's not just some, weird, phony thing. Oh, and check this out. It's his idea. It's his idea to be intimate with us and to come into this relationship with us, to touch us in our lives. I want you to, I'm sharing stuff like kind of out of my heart today with you in many ways. I've made some notes for you, but I want you to be touched by God, I guess. That's what I'm saying. And so, and if you do, you will know you're touched by God. You'll know it. No one will have to, explain it to you, talk you into it, because we have a really serious God that seriously wants to be in our lives and wants to manifest directly to us. So it's real, it's intimate. Now, we know that Jesus, by the way, he was all God and all man, right? He had this like perfect spirit, right? And he was without sin. And by the way, the whole idea of him being without sin, you can find that in the book of Peter and Corinthians and First John and tons of other scriptures. I mean, there's dozens of scripture that talk about this perfect, sin-free, perfect spirit Jesus, when the spirit that he had in him. And now all of a sudden, here he is on earth. Like I said, he popped out of eternity and came into earth. And now I started thinking the other day, like I said, I was talking to my wife about this. I'm like, well, he also had a soul. And I think sometimes we forget that. Like, about your soul. You know about your emotions. You know how things affect you, yes? Well, let me introduce you to Jesus today. Because he had a soul, by the way, that could be afflicted and tormented. What? What are we talking about here? Yeah, yes, he can be afflicted. Hebrews 4:15 says that he was touched with the feelings of our infirmities. So how does Jesus get touched with that? How do you sense that unless you're a human being with a real soul that can actually be affected by emotions, by situations, by loss, by gain? Yeah? And if he didn't, then really, what are we talking about here? Who was he exactly then? And so, so the Bible says he was tempted in every way like you and I. Now, I don't know about you, but when I get tempted, it's serious and it's in my soul, it's in my heart, it's in my intellect, it's in my emotions, it's in my will, it's in my stubbornness, it's in all of those things. And that's real. And if he was tempted in every way like me, yet without sin, right? He's perfect. He's all God. He did not sin. But his soul had to feel the impact that my soul feels if he was tempted in every way like me. It doesn't mean he fell. It doesn't mean he sinned, but he had to feel it. He had to get what it is in our hearts, in our emotions, in our intellect, to be really stressed in that area. And I'm bringing this to you because I'm trying to introduce you to Jesus, man on earth and all God, that isn't so different from you and I. And sometimes I think we forget that. Like here on earth, he was all man. Another one in Hebrews 5, 8, and 9, it says that he learned obedience by the things he suffered. Wait a minute. He suffered? Wait, I thought he was God. I thought he couldn't be touched. Really, he's up in heaven flopping around. He's, this, mighty, tremendous God that nothing affects him. But when he was here on earth, his soul, you need to hear this, his soul had to learn obedience by suffering. And that's not just the suffering that happened at his passion and on the cross. I'm sure that was a big hunk of it. But hey, he grew up. He walked the earth. By the way, he had friends, yes, that he needed. Oh man, some people, I know I'm going to rock some people's theology out there, but Jesus Christ on the earth, if he's all man and all God, he needed friends. Yeah. By the way, not only he needed, he wanted friends. Okay, so I want you to be touched by this God today who's real and can, he can taste us, he can feel us, he can walk with us in a reality, not this just ethereal God up in heaven and I pray to him when I need something or want something, but a God that will walk with you intensely and intimately. And so, by the way, here's Jesus. He experienced betrayal. Do you think he experienced the betrayal and that didn't affect his soul? I mean, what was he, a robot? No way. He experienced betrayal. And he didn't experience betrayal just from Judas, because we all want to point to him. But guess what? His best friends, his closest friends, John, James, they all, took a hike when things were getting really rough there. One of them denies him. I mean, really, that would be like, someone comes in and asks me, about one of my friends, and I go, well, I don't know that guy. I never met him before. And then you find out about that and the betrayal, the disappointment that his friends inflicted on him. Maybe intentionally, maybe unintentionally. They were going through their own life. But the reality is, that's what he went through here on the earth in his soul. I want you to hear that. I want you to see that because we are not different in that way. We experience that. I know this is going to help somebody out there. So you are not so different, right? Not so different from you. He experienced the same kind of stuff. And what about his physical body? Because here he is, all God, all man, right? And now he has a soul that we just discussed on several scriptures and there's hundreds of others that could be affected by the conditions and the situation around his life. And guess what? He also had a physical body. I was teasing myself because I get funny with this stuff. I'm like, so did God catch the flu? It's like, really? I mean, I'm sorry. Behind the camera, Poor Brooke is laughing
I
now.
brought this up in crosswalk before about whether or not, Jesus pooped.
Let's not go there. But he did. He may have caught the flu. We don't know. And so, by the way, he grew old. He didn't remain a little baby. By the way, I'm going to go off on a little tangent here, but I have a hard time with people who only relate to Jesus as the little baby in the manger, especially when we come out of Christmas. Everybody's all there, and I'm like, dude, he's not a baby in a manger anymore. He's the everlasting, ever great God and man that, he's past that now. He's a loving God and all that, but he's a man. And so he actually grew old, had to experience, I'm going to guess, sicknesses and tempted, right? Hebrews 2:18, if you're looking for scriptures about this. Temptation. He experienced that in his life. And by the way, this was a body that could grow old and did grow old and got sick. Luke 2:52. Go read that. You'll have a great time with these and you'll be so confused, and we'll help you out later. Oh, by the way, he was a carpenter. He was one of the dudes out there banging with hammers and stuff. Do we think a guy growing up, learning the tools of the trade and stuff, just because he's God, he never got a splinter? Or just because he's God, he never hit his thumb and went, oh, Jesus. No. No, seriously. Yeah. Oh, holy. No, he was touched with the feeling of our infirmity. He gets us. He understands us. He feels us. You understand what I'm saying? This spectacular, everlasting God, the complete humanity and mystery of godliness is wrapped up in Jesus Christ. You can read about that also. 1 Timothy. I'm giving you a lot of scriptures today. You ought to go back and read them in context. Make sure I'm not taking stuff out of context for you. 1 Timothy 3:16. This is where humanity and godliness came together in the form of Jesus Christ here on the earth. And that God-man experienced everything on this earth that you and I do, except he did not sin. Right? He did not sin. Right? He was tempted in every way, yet without sin. And we have to understand that about God. We have to know that about him and know as a man, he was touched with all the other stuff that you're touched with. So I want you to hear that you are probably not too far from God, and he wants to touch you today. He wants to touch you. He wants to, he wants to do this for you today. He wants you to know that he can walk alongside of you. And by the way, Jesus did all of that. He experienced all of that. He walked that whole road for you, to show you that as a man or a woman of God here on the earth, you could walk with the same kind of overcoming life. Not just torn with your emotions, not just torn with physical affliction and infirmities, but as you walk through those things, that he's touching you, he's walking with you, and he did it himself. That's the real Jesus we serve. So I asked him, why? So he could demonstrate in this present reality his life. This is why he went through all this as a man. This is why he went through the suffering. This is why he went through the torment. This is why he went through, being tempted and, growing up in life just like you and I. It's so that he demonstrates to us directly that we, as men and women of God, that there's a present reality of his life in our life today. A life that he wants you to partake of. And so I want you to hear this today as we kind of wrap things up. We have a God that is touched with the feelings of our infirmity. We have a God that wants you to know that you're touched by him. And we have a God that wants you to really partake of him in reality. So I don't want you to go away today looking for some spiritual, spooky, mystical experience with God, I want you to go away and say, God, I want to encounter with you. I want you to just walk into my life. I want you to walk with me because I know you did this on the earth. And you do that, you open up to God in that kind of reality in your life and that kind of openness before him. I promise you, he will find you and he will walk with you as a close friend. So I hope that blessed you today in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Go out there and be good and be close to God.
Something interesting that I looked up behind the camera while Pastor Bob was talking was because he kept saying touch, and I thought that was so significant because he kept saying it, and I decided to just look up the definition of touch. Obviously, we know what touch means, but it said in the Webster's dictionary, whatever, that to come so close to something that you come in contact with it. And I thought that part was so important, the beginning, to come so close to something. And how do you do that? You know, there's either they come so close to you or you come so close to it, or it's kind of a 50-50 thing, or 70-30, 80-20, your style, whatever, I don't care. But God has done his 50, we'll say it's 50, and so now it's up to us to do the other 50 to come so close that you come in contact. And I thought, man, when you really think about coming in contact with God, who made everything, that's actually kind of like mind-blowing. So I'm walking away with that thought, and I think maybe it should help one of you guys, or maybe all of you. I don't know. So how could we come closer to God? That's kind of my takeaway from this whole thing, to allow him to touch us, for him and I to touch each other. That's pretty significant, because you don't really touch people that you don't care about. Some people hate being touched, but to allow God to touch you, that's very intimate and very important. So I thought that was super awesome, Pastor Bob. Thank you. And if you thought that you liked this video, you could give it a thumbs up, subscribe, turn on the post notifications, and leave a comment. We do read them. And there's a prayer request form. I will say it till the day that I die, that we have a prayer request form, and I check it every day, sometimes on the weekends. And we really care about those prayers, and we send them to our prayer team at Pastor Bob and I. Pob? That's your new name. Pastor Bob, Pob. We also pray for you, and we take it seriously, and so that is totally open for you to drop a request. And with that, we will see you next week.